Good afternoon, and welcome to Public Interest Podcast with your host, Jordan Cooper, where we talk with politicians, activists, and advocates, and anyone else who works to advance the public interest. We're here today during episode 10 with State Senator Brian Feldman, who represents District 15 in Montgomery County, Maryland. Good afternoon, Brian.
Great to be here, Jordan.
So let's start off with just talking about what you've done in your life or what you currently do to advance the public interest and why.
Well, I've been in public service in different capacities for a long time. Before I was in elective office, I was a Justice Department lawyer for 13 years. And so in that capacity, I felt I was always wearing the white hat, representing the people of the United States of America in that capacity in the courtroom, litigating certain kinds of cases around the United States. And so it wasn't a big transition for me when I went into elective office. I was thinking about trying different things that I had done for over a decade and was thinking about other things I might want to do that I also considered important. You say public service, I would say, helping the society around us, and elective office was one of the things I always had thought about doing. An opportunity presented itself, and I jumped at that opportunity, and fortunately was able to get elected. And that was 14 years ago, first to our Maryland House of Delegates, and now eventually made my way to the Maryland State Senate. So, for me, it's been public service, not just during this 14 years, but the prior 13 years. So it's been really a 25-year-plus-year odyssey in the public service realm.
So how has public service in your life evolved from where you were not an elected official advancing the public interest through the judiciary to being elected and advancing the public interest through the legislative branch?
Well, I think elective office is different in a lot of ways than being a lawyer for the federal government. I think you have to think about your constituents. Now I had constituents, which I could say was the United States of America and the people of our nation as a Justice Department lawyer, but it was very narrow, and it was a subject area that, in my case, I went after people who cheat on their taxes. So it wasn't necessarily a juicy subject area. What I like about public office is you can pick and you can decide what issues you think are important to making the world around you a better place. And other people, some people in public office think one thing is important, and depending on their background, can kind of place a focus on that. In my case, I've chosen to focus on certain types of subject areas that I enjoy and important to my county, and maybe even equally important to the people I represent. If you represent rural Maryland or rural USA, your issues may be a little bit different, than somebody representing an urban area, suburban area like I do. So I like the idea that you're independent. You can pick and choose what's important in your mind to the future of your state or your country. And then you really can make a huge difference in the people's lives. People talk about legislation, an equally important, if not more important, part of being in elective office is what you do for constituents. I represent about 130,000 people from rural parts of our state to urban parts of our county. But we get, unlike the old days, if you wanted to reach out to me, you'd have to write me a letter, and it would be a very arduous process. Today, it's really, really easy for anybody of the 130,000 people who have a problem to contact me and reach out to me and ask for help if they have a problem. And then I get to speak to groups and talk about what's really happening, in our state. And so it gives you an opportunity, unfiltered, to help people to leave a legacy. Ultimately, when you're done, we all eventually leave these spots that we occupy for a short period of time. And, it's when you leave, you want to have a legacy of helping people, helping the state or the country you serve. And so it's different. It's a broader, I would say, more independent way of serving the public than was the case when I was narrowly focused as a Justice Department lawyer on a particular subject area, not of my choosing.
Well, gosh, there are a lot of ground you just covered there. I guess I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about the actual issue areas that you have chosen to focus on to serve your constituency. And then once we address that, how you even define your constituency, because you are a member of a 188 member legislature. So in a sense, you have a 6 million person constituency. Also, Maryland has been at the vanguard of a lot of different issues in the past few years while you've been an elected official. And so in a sense, we might even be said to have a national constituency in providing inspiration to other state legislatures or the Congress. And then again, you have to say, well, is our loyalty to the Washington area? Am I focusing on metro funding? Is it just to District 15? Is it to Montgomery County? Is it to all of Maryland? And then to what extent do I follow my own conscience, the delegate versus trustee idea? So the trustee is I'm following my own conscience. And then in political science, the theory, as you well know, would be to what extent am I a representative? Meaning regardless of whether I agree with my constituents, I must be the arm of my constituents' voice. And if they want X and I want Y, I should still vote for X because that's what my constituents want. So how do you balance out and determine what the interests are of your community? How do you define what your constituency is? And then what are some of the issues you've tried to advance for your constituency?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot in your question, and I think it's a complicated question, and it's a question that I think anybody who's ever been in elective office has had to wrestle with. For me, I gravitated to issues that I perceived to be important for the folks who actually voted me into office. So it's a little bit narrow. I mean, I am a state senator, so no doubt about it, I'm interested in advancing our state. Mm-hmm. But the reality is I was elected by a subgroup of that state, mm-hmm. and there are issues that are important to that constituent base. And so in the case of my district, in my county, my very first term, introduced a package of bills to advance our biotechnology sector. Mm-hmm. That is an area where I perceived that there was tremendous upside potential for our state. And within our state, Montgomery County was particularly well positioned to be a leader, just not even nationally, but internationally, partly because within the county we have NIH and we have federal agencies and we have an FDA presence here and NIST and some other things, and a lot of biotech companies located in the district and the county. Mm-hmm. And beyond that, these are companies that are looking for cures to cancer, that are really looking for cures to diseases that impact humanity. So not only was it a subject area that I picked initially that was good for my county and my constituent base, but I think in terms of the big, more macro picture, it was a subject area that if I could help promote and advance, could advance humanity. For example, as a result of a particular issue, I put together I created something called the Biotechnology Investment Tax Credit, which gives investors a tax incentive and a tax credit for investing in small, early-stage biotech companies. So that was 10 years ago. Since that time, I have had numerous companies who have come up to me who are doing research for cures to various forms of cancer and the like, have said that but for that tax credit, we would have gone under. That but for the fact that some of my angel investors that I could market to were going to get some subsidy from the state, we would never have had an opportunity to get early diagnostic lung cancer product and some other things, and the BioShield and cybersecurity and all these kinds of things. So and then as a result of that bill, the next was a similar program for cybersecurity companies. These are some of the most significant issues facing our nation, and again, a subset, Maryland and subset. So I'd like to focus on issues that are, yes, important for my constituent base, but also have, again, broad societal implications, and biotech, later cybersecurity, and then some other issues. And I happen to also serve on committees that was a subject. Part of it is when you get elected, you get assigned to committees, and that's sort of naturally where you're going to have the most influence, the most juice, and you're going to fall. So I served on an economics committee in the House. I'm on the Senate Finance Committee currently, and we actually have jurisdiction over these very same issues. So again, the synergy here is beautiful, The committees have authority over these issues. It's good for my county. And then again, coming back to the big picture. So that's kind of how I've approached what I've chosen to focus on, things that check a lot of those boxes at the same time.
It seems like you arrived at these issues through a rational deductive reasoning process rather than did you have any background information or experience with biotech or cybersecurity, or did you just realize that because of these synergies those were issues that you were going to try to focus?
No, I mean, I came from the tax lawyer world, so in that sense on this tax credit I had some idea of how tax credits might be of some value in the private sector, but I think it was more folks, once I was in elective office, folks who were in that industry came to me and said, look, we know you're new to the legislature. Here's our story, and here's where we think there's some gaps, and here's where we think Maryland could has some potential, but here's some things that we think would be helpful. Why don't you take a look at what they're doing in Israel? Why don't you take a look at what they're doing in other states here? And so part of it was folks came to me and made a pitch that made a lot of sense, and a little light bulb went off in my mind, and it was like, man, this makes complete sense on all these levels that I then now can describe. But I can't say that I came up with the ideas. Other folks who really know this space came to me, so I was a little fortunate on that front.
Now, you are a certified public accountant, are you not?
I was, yeah. So I started my career in the CPA world. So I like numbers and finance and all that. But I quickly gravitated into the lawyer world. So I have both those backgrounds. So I'm the only lawyer CPA combination, certainly in the Maryland legislature. But I think one of the only ones, maybe the only one, even currently in any legislature in the United States. So.
I asked that because Maryland, as our listeners may or may not know, is a citizen legislature. Now, I guess, might you tell the listeners what kind of the general composition is of the legislature and how individuals' careers and different professions as citizen legislators kind of affects the way legislation goes through Annapolis?
Yeah, well, so first of all, one misconception about politics generally is, now this in Congress, you have a huge number of members of Congress have legal backgrounds, lawyers. That's not the case with most part-time state legislatures.
Now, is Congress full-time or part-time?
Congress is full-time, and most 43 of the 50 state legislatures are part-time. So we only meet part of the year.
How long?
In Maryland's case, we meet for 90 days, 3 months of the year. And the other 9 months, folks are doing different kinds of things. We have teachers, we have farmers. But we're at an all-time low of lawyers. We've never had fewer lawyers in the Maryland General Assembly. So we have 47 senators, 141 members of the House of Delegates for a total of 188, and we only have 30-some lawyers, which shocks people. The reality is, in the modern era, it's very difficult to practice law for a law firm, for example, and then decide to tell the firm, by the way, I'll be splitting for 3 months, can't bill any hours, can't make any money for the firm. And so that, as a practical matter, has in other professions, not just lawyers. So you have a very broad cross-section of professions in these citizen part-time legislatures. Now, that's not the case in the 6 or 7 states like New York, Pennsylvania, California.
Massachusetts.
Have full-time legislatures. I think the makeup's a little bit going to be a little different, look a little more like the United States Congress.
So I guess, how would you suppose that affects dynamics down there?
Well, I'm a little partisan. I mean, I personally think the lawyer background's the best background for what we do. I mean, I came from a courtroom, for example, as a DOJ lawyer. So for me, the hearing process, how issues are framed, questioning witnesses, debating on the floor of the state Senate, debating with your colleagues, that was very similar to my years in the courtroom as a lawyer. So, for me, I think it was, and then just reading bills and understanding, how to read a bill and what it means. And so when you compare that to somebody who, for example, spent their life as a farmer coming into this process, who probably has never done any public speaking, is, not well-versed necessarily in law, for them, I think it's a much bigger adjustment. So I've always thought that the lawyers in our legislature have a bit of an edge, a bit of an advantage in terms of how issues are framed and how to articulate arguments, and not have a lot of red herrings and understand the unintended consequences of bills.
Right.
And I get endlessly frustrated in our hearings with the way folks without lawyer training ask questions of witnesses that have nothing to do with bills, and so it can be a little frustrating. But it does impact. I think as a result, a lot of these citizen legislatures end up with legislation that is loose, that ends up the next year having to come back and be corrected because people haven't fully or don't fully understand the meaning of the words. The words in a statute have a lot of meaning. Courts then have to spend years interpreting the words that we put on these into the bills. So it impacts it. I would say not in necessarily even a positive way. It's not a critique of any of my colleagues, but again, if you come from the lawyer world, you see a difference between people with that background and folks who come from various other kinds of backgrounds. But that's, at the same time, it's a strength to have people from all these various different backgrounds, people with small business backgrounds. We're debating business issues, agricultural issues, to have farmers, and all the other kinds of things. So I just want to make clear, I think it's basically a strength to have people whose self-identity and entire ego is not wrapped up in being in elective office. These are folks that in most cases derive their self-esteem from other things they're doing professionally. So I think that's a positive thing as compared to Congress, where everything is wrapped about getting reelected, and everything's about the title of being a congressman or a United States senator. And I think that warps things and makes people willing to do almost anything to stay elected, whereas even income-wise, most of the people are making most of their money outside of the legislature, so they're not financially dependent on being elective office. They're not dependent on elective office for their self-esteem and how they view themselves. And I think the citizen legislative model is a positive one when I compare it to the alternative.
And just to define terms for our listeners, a bill is what a legislator introduces into the legislature. If it does pass, it becomes law. That law is known as statute, and of course, subsequent to the law being passed, which means it's passed by both houses in a bicameral legislature, Nebraska being the only exception, there being unicameral, and then signed by the governor, or of course, a veto being overridden. Then executive agencies will promulgate, which means to create regulations that are more specific guidelines to enforce these statutes.
And another thing you're missing is we have a third branch of government, the judiciary, who then interprets what those laws mean, and people can fight about the meaning of those words in those statutes. And so that's how the system in the United States works.
So you've gone through a lot. You've had a career in the Department of Justice. You still practice law.
Right, and then I've gotten into academia over the last decade. I teach this very subject at Johns Hopkins University, some courses on federalism, the interplay between Congress and the states, and state policy.
What does federalism mean?
It's really, I think, it's a term that really refers to the interplay, the delicate balance between Congress and our states, and it's embodied in our United States Constitution, in the 10th Amendment primarily. And so we've got constitutional principles in play that certain powers are given to our federal government, certain powers to our state government, and those that delineation gets mucked up over time, but it's laid out in the United States Constitution. But the term federalism really refers to that back and forth tension, interplay between Congress and the states.
In a danger of going a few minutes over, there was a topic I wanted to address, which we briefly skirted a moment ago. We spoke about part-time legislatures versus a full-time legislature like the federal legislature in the United States. And you were speaking about how part-time legislators receive income and expertise and are less from elsewhere and are less dependent on the political process. The question is, what are the merits or demerits of having a full-time professional class of politicians? For instance, If you were to present yourself in a criminal case before before a court, before a judge and a jury, you would want to have a professional attorney who's not a freshman, who hasn't been there for a few years, but who has had a long career in gaining expertise in the law. Same thing in medicine, same thing in almost any area of the economy. Why, and now in Montgomery County, we have term limits on the ballot. So what are your thoughts on the merits or demerits of having a professional class of politicians?
Well, when you say a professional class of politician, I think that it would depend on the size of the state, the number of issues that state. I think that for most states, we're only a state of 6 million people. We're not a large state. I think we get away with the 3-month period. I think it works. Now, again, constituent work. My office, to be clear, our offices are open 12 months a year. So even though we're in our legislative session doing the work of passing bills, if you have a problem, 12 months a year, you call my office, you get somebody picks up and they help you out. So I want to distinguish between it. It's not a part-time office or a part-time job from that standpoint.
So that's called constituent service.
Correct. That's a 12-month job. The 3 months, I think for most states, is probably sufficient. I mean, I don't know that and I've been there a while, I don't know what we would do with 12. I think that we would be unbelievable amount of dead time. I think it forces us to focus for 3 months on the key issues for the state. And we manage by the middle of April. We're there from the middle of January. In Maryland, middle of January, the middle of April. We manage to get what I think are the important issues done. Now, if there are some big issues that come up during the year, the governor at any time can call us back into a special session. And during my time, we've had many of those. So, it's not as though we're not capable of meeting at other times during the year if warranted. So we have professional staff, though. It's important to remember, even though the politicians, you may call them professional or not, I don't think that the fact that we meet 3 months makes us any less professional. We have committee staff, we have professional legislative staff that are full-time state employees that provide support to us. So I think it's a professional operation, and I think we are professional politicians. And for 12 months of the year, we provide professional politician constituent service. The fact that we may only need 3 months of the year to really vet some of the legislative parts of our job, I don't think makes us less professional, or really, I think, undercuts kind of what we can accomplish.
Now, just a fun fact for our listeners, the rationale behind having a 90-day session in Maryland between the early part of January and early part of April is actually alluded to in our state seal, where we have a fisherman and a farmer on either side of the flag and crown. And the reason for that, of course, is because Chesapeake Bay fishermen were not fishing in the winter months, and the farmers in Maryland were not plowing their fields in the winter months, so they were free from their daily labors to attend to public business. So I want to wrap up the podcast in just a moment with a final question for you, Senator Feldman. So we've talked a lot about your history and your involvement. You've been through a lot. Is there anything else you'd like to add about what your motivations have been, why you have given so much, why you have dedicated yourself to public service? What does public service mean to you? Why have you spent your life trying to advance the public interest?
Well, we're only on the earth for a short period of time, and I've kind of made a determination that, I wanted to spend my time on things that I thought provided some kind of long-lasting, enduring legacy for my time here. And so I think political office is one way to do it. As I say, working, in public service, Department of Justice was another way, but there are other ways that folks can do it. I think it's important at the ultimate end of the day is to think about what you can do to make a difference in the world around you. Not everybody looks at it that way. A lot of people, it's all about making the most money that you can possibly make, and when you pass to have the largest bank balance, that's one approach to life. But I hope that there are a lot of folks out there with an alternative. One thing that concerns me right now, and I'll be candid, is the political and we're in the middle of a presidential campaign right now that has gotten so nasty and dirty. And the question I listened today, somebody was asking, why don't more people, we can't get more qualified, better people running for political office? Well, I mean, when you see what one has to go through or what they have to subject themselves to run for office today at the very highest levels, it turns a lot of people off. And so I'm hoping we can get past this current election and in the future have folks run who are, not going to go into the gutter and don't see political elections in that way. And so I think we're in kind of a down spot. I am a little bit, again, worried that we're not attracting the best and the brightest to run for political office in the country. And people are turned off, and particularly younger folks may be cynical, and that is a big concern. And I just hope this is kind of just a rough spot. And so for those of you out here who think about wanting to run for political office, I really encourage you to do that and just put this other presidential stuff to the side. It's not representative, I think, of the country as a whole.
Well, thank you, Senator Feldman, for joining us. Our listeners take advice from Senator Feldman that public service through elected office or otherwise is worthwhile doing and as a means of almost in a self-interested kind of way, making your life as meaningful and fulfilling as possible. And hopefully you may find some way, it may be running for the legislature, it may just be volunteering in a local soup kitchen, but whatever it is, serving the public interest is a source of great meaning for many individuals. So we thank you for joining us, episode 10 of Public Interest Podcast with your host, Jordan Cooper, where we interview politicians, activists, and advocates, and anyone else who seeks to leave the world better than they found it. Thank you so much. Look forward to joining you next time.